All right, we'll get this party started. I want to say good evening to everyone and thank you for joining us. My name is Scott Leverance. I'm one of the assistant principals at Antioch Community High School. And we're really thankful and appreciative that you've taken some time away from your Thursday evening to tune in for our spring college planning night. We offer 2 college planning nights each year. In the fall, we typically offer a career expo for a variety of colleges to come in and have booths up at ACHS. Weren't able to do that this year, unfortunately, with an additional number of sessions and other great events then as well. And then here in the spring, we partner with a couple of college representatives from the Chicago area, and we are super thankful and appreciative to have 2 of the very, very best with us tonight. Welcoming Ms. Megan O'Rourke from Providence College and Ms. Annabelle Vinson representing the University of Iowa. Each are college admissions representatives, but they are more than just that. They have an incredible amount of wealth about the college application and admissions process, all the way through financial aid. And so they're going to be here to share a lot of that really amazing expertise with us tonight from that college admissions angle, so experts in the field. Before I pass the reins over to them, I do want to start with a quick thank you to one of our school counselors in particular. Ms. Taylor Travers does a tremendous amount of work to get this evening coordinated and prepared, and it would be remiss of me not to give her some appreciation and a very large thank you for all the work she's done to make this evening possible. So we will be recording our session tonight and making it available later. So if there is something that you missed during the conversation here, please know that we will be recording and sharing our presentation afterwards as well. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see a Q&A button. And please feel free during the presentations tonight to pop in there with a question. We'll watch those and respond to some as we go, but we'll also address those with Megan and Annabelle after their presentation when they can give a more thorough response to some of those questions. One other quick note is that on the presentation screen right here, you can see a link that was also in the flyer, the not so shortened URL of bit.ly/Antioch Spring College Planning will take you to a nice little simple website we've developed that has a link to tonight's presentation, but then also is where we'll post the recording and where our counseling team has assembled some really nice videos, again, about the college admissions process, financial aid, and other matters related to the college and career search and exploration. Without any further ado, though, let me pass the reins over to Megan and Annabelle and say one more time, thank you, ladies, so much for being here with us tonight.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. Hi, everybody. We are so glad to be here. I'm going to just take a second. We've got some slides for you all this evening that we want to share with you. My name is Megan O'Rourke. I work at Providence College. This is it's almost going to be year 15 for me. I have worked for private schools my entire admission career. I've been at Providence now for a couple of years, but 15 total in the profession. And I am thrilled to join you all this evening to chat about finding the right college and how you do it. And hopefully our plan is to help you feel a little bit less stressed along the way. Annabelle?
And I'm Annabelle Vinson. Oddly enough, I've also been in the profession for almost 15 years. So we have the same anniversary, Megan. I grew up here in the Chicagoland area. So I actually grew up in Mundelein. I attended the University of Iowa. When I graduated Iowa, that was the first place I got a job. And now I've been here for almost 15 years. So all of my time in admissions has been with the University of Iowa.
Awesome. Now, because you said where you graduated from, I did this last year and it actually worked. Do we have any Butler Bulldogs in the room? If we do, pop it in the chat for me. I graduated from Butler quite a few years ago, but if we have any Bulldogs, go Bulldogs. Okay, so let's get started. What we want to do tonight is really kind of walk you through, we'll leave this here for a second. We're going to walk you through how to kind of figure out what kinds of schools to look for, how you find the right fit, all of the things to consider. We're going to talk about COVID and how that's going to impact, at least initially, your search process. For us, we've both been doing this for a long time. And I think the longer that we both do this job, the more that we recognize students and families, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of anxiety, and rightly so. Colleges and universities don't make this easy on you guys. So our hope is that by kind of talking you through some of these things, and feel free as we're talking, Scott mentioned the Q&A, if you want to use the chat function, whatever. We want to keep this as informal as possible. Normally, it's more of a back and forth when we're in the auditorium. So we want to make sure that we still have that vibe going, even in a Zoom webinar. So if there's something that you're like, I want to know more, just type that in the chat, type it in the Q&A. We're happy to address them as we go and then at the end too. Because I think ultimately, my hope, and Annabelle too, we've talked about this presentation and what we want to make sure that you all get out of it is that you feel better, you feel more informed from people who actually do this job. Really, that's kind of where we are with everything. We have some questions for you, so we are going to be looking for some engagement. So if you all would help me out and let us know if you are a family or a student watching, and students, you're the oldest, you're the first one in the family to go to college, or parents, this is your first time going through the process. If you could let us know in the chat, that would be helpful, just to get a lay of the land of who is here tonight. Thank you, I can see that blinking. Or if you're an old pro and maybe this is your last one to send through, let us know that too. We can all celebrate together that you will soon be empty nesters, because that's always an exciting thing to see. I would say a couple of quick points for our families as you all are either maybe navigating this for the first time, or this isn't the first time, maybe it's the third time that you've done this, or the second time. If this is not your first kid going through, you have got to wipe the slate clean. I think it's super important to know that families that have gone through the process, things have possibly changed. Iowa is like such a great example, and Annabelle can talk about this, but especially with COVID, things have changed in a lot of places, and it changed pretty quickly. And so please make sure that you just kind of go into this open-minded, first time for everything. This is a new child. We're gonna navigate this as we go. And for the families that have never gone through this process, know that you have a lot of resources and people to help you figure out how to get from Antioch to wherever you're gonna land after this. So you've got plenty of resources, plenty of people to help, and you will be just fine. Your counterpart parents who have done this before can give you that knowledge that they're still here to tell you that it'll be okay. So let's start and talk about the three things that we like to talk about when it comes to how to maybe start your college search process, and the three things that we think are the most important when it comes to finding your dream school, finding your right fit when it comes to a college or university.
And we're going to dive into each of these things more individually, but collectively, like as you're starting these conversations at home around how are we going to go about this college search process, what kind of schools are you interested in, you'll notice, and you might have already noticed, that priorities are different. Things that you're looking for in an institution are different. So parents and students, you may both agree that like one of the most important things that you're looking at when you're considering schools is the academics. Do they have the major that you're interested in studying? Or do they offer, like if you're unsure of what you want to study, do they have majors that you could potentially see yourself being interested in? Students, you might be focusing in on personal fit. Beyond academics, like how am I going to get involved on campus? Are there clubs and organizations, research opportunities, Big Ten sports, if you're like an Iowa fan, or just sports in general or performing arts? So personal fit and how to get involved on campus. And then parents, you can probably guess that one of the things that you're interested in, and rightfully so, is the financial fit. So what is this going to look like? Not only scholarships and aid at the very beginning as students are entering college, but over the course of 4 years, and maybe even beyond that, if students are looking to go into graduate or professional schools. So with all these three things, where they overlap in the middle and where they converge in the middle is really the best fit for the family. We know it's ultimately the family's decision. Yes, we want you to encourage your student to choose what's best for them, but we want the family to be involved in that conversation.
I think too, for a lot of families, like they've started having some of these general conversations. I think Annabelle would agree. This is definitely a time to be having discussions as a family, to start talking through some of these different things. So let's start with academics. I think that's usually the easiest place to start. Like Annabelle mentioned, like parents and students are pretty much in line with the kinds of things that maybe the student is interested in, or maybe if the student is undecided, there's things they know they don't like, right? So what are some things to consider as you think about academics? And you'll notice, hopefully, that we're not necessarily talking about size of school yet or distance from home and things like that. We're just going to focus on, because that's really going to fall into another category. We're really focusing on what is it that you want to major in? You might have an answer to that. You might not. For those students that are sitting there like, what if I don't? You're going to be fine. I think one thing that's been very helpful over the past 10 or so years is that a lot of schools have really cultivated programs for undecided students. So regardless of how you enter, thinking about what things are important to you or what things you really enjoy might be a way to kind of guide you towards a school selection. So looking at this slide, these are the kinds of questions we want you to consider. Does the school have my major? If you have selected a major, great. You're not going to go to the University of Iowa and study marine biology. It's just not going to happen, right? They're a landlocked school in a landlocked state. You're going to have to go farther away to a coast to get marine biology. Are you looking for something specific that might narrow down the list of schools? So aviation or pharmacy or some sort of, fine art program. Every school has a different list of things that they offer. Schools will tell you things that they are known for, but we've all kind of cultivated our list of majors. And in some instances, the list of majors isn't really going to help you narrow down the schools. It's just going to help you focus on, okay, this school offers this program or these kinds of programs, which are the things I'm interested in. I think you also have to consider then the size of the department, what size is the average class, what kinds of opportunities are available to you when it comes to access to professors. We get this question all the time, and because Annabelle works for a big school and I work for a smaller school. I think people would be surprised to find out that when a student gets to junior and senior year at Iowa, the class sizes between a school like Providence and a school like Iowa are actually going to be pretty similar because you're in such a specialized program at that point. The class sizes look more alike than what you'd recognize or what you'd think. And so students really should focus on, what are the things I like, maybe if I have a major, what are the schools that have that major? And then what are the things maybe that I'm thinking about after I graduate? So are you thinking about grad school? Are you thinking about, going to work? How are those things going to be impacted by what I decide to study? I think the other part to this too is then what kind of student you are. So if you're a student that doesn't like blood, for example, then maybe a pre-med track, even if you like biology, for example, that's not going to be the right path. But biology with the intent of going into research makes more sense, right? Or if you really love numbers, you might say, okay, I'm going to look for schools that offer, engineering programs, business programs, math or actuarial science. I think students at this point, it's just a matter of considering likes versus not likes if you're undecided. That's really an easy place to start. I also think then that academic fit comes into your academic fit to the institution. So do you kind of line up with your GPA, with the classes you've taken at Antioch? If the school is requiring a test score, does your test score line up with that institution? So I think for many students, there's a couple of different things that you have to consider when we talk about academic fit. And I think class sizes can be part of it. But the biggest difference between a big school and a small school, or what you'll find, is that for a school like mine, the classes will remain pretty consistent in terms of size all the way through. Whereas at the University of Iowa, they might be a little bit bigger and then get to be about the size of Providence. Wouldn't you say that, Annabelle, in your experience at Iowa?
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay. And internships, studying abroad, research, those things are offered everywhere. So I think students get tripped up in thinking that they have to find those things at the respective schools that they're considering. We are all, big and small, going to offer a variety of kinds of opportunities like those, right? Academic or co-curricular opportunities to supplement whatever you're going to study. So know that those are available. And depending on the school, the amount or the opportunities that are presented to you based on the major you're in, yeah, there might be more at a bigger school, but they're going to be available everywhere. So don't get caught up in that too much. I think thinking about the kind of learner you are, the things that you enjoy, and then if you have landed on a major, looking at those schools specifically, those are the kinds of things that you can do when it comes to academic fit. Annabelle, am I missing anything?
Nope, I think you hit on all of it. I have nothing to add, but yeah, great points, especially about when it comes to class size, moving into the classes and into your major, but then also opportunities. So you have to consider those, but just know that they're available everywhere, right?
Yeah, right. So I think then, academics can be a nebulous topic for a lot of people, but I would say that students, this is a conversation to have with mom and dad, right? Like maybe you talk about what kind of learner you are, you talk about your academic profile and how that matches up to some schools that you might be considering. And then you can start to think about, okay, what from there, now that I've kind of landed on some of these bigger picture things when it comes to academics, how does that then relate to the personal fit, the different things that are important to me when it comes to the size and all of that. So I'm going to let Annabelle take over from here.
Yeah, and I think the great thing about like this day and age is that you can do research online. Like you can literally Google schools that have your academic major. You have great resources in your high school with your counselors to say these are, and they are super connected with, like the admissions professionals, so they can get you connected with schools that might align with your academic fit. When it comes to personal fit, or with that being said, if you find an institution that you are really excited about based on their academic offerings, try to get on their mailing list or their communications list so we can get you in our system and invite you to things that might be happening or information related to your particular major. But then also you'll get those pamphlets in the mail, the booklets in the mail, and that's where it can get a little bit, all right, we need to dive in a little bit deeper for the personal fit, because as you're going through the booklets, they all look the same. Everyone's smiling, it's sunny outside. And you have like the one snow picture, unless you're in like Arizona, then you probably don't. But what you're looking at is personal fit and then institution fit. So what are you looking for? Do you want to attend a public or private institution? What's your learning style? Do you thrive in smaller class sizes just across the board? Or can you see yourself like attending a lecture, actively taking notes, but then also knowing that you have that smaller discussion component to dive deeper and like address any questions that you might have? And so there are benefits to both. You just need to figure out what's the best fit for you. Location, do you want to be close to home? Do you want to be within driving distance? Or are you okay hopping on a plane and flying to, your institution? I would say for me personally, I thought that I wanted to hop on a plane until I realized, I'm very close with my family. And so I would prefer to not miss out on birthdays and special events that are happening. And I would want to be able to drive or have somebody come, get me in a weekend and not have the whole weekend gone. So that's part of that family conversation, right? Like, what do you feel comfortable? And you might just discover this along the way. You might think one way, start doing visits, start diving deeper, and then realize that that's not what you want. So this is why it's important to start those conversations now and just do that self-reflection now. What kinds of activities do you want to get involved in? Are you really wanting to get involved in intramural sports? Maybe you are an athlete in high school, but you don't anticipate playing at a Division 1, 2, or 3 level, but you still want to keep up with that. Or maybe you're interested in performing arts. You are really involved in theater, music, and dance, and you want a community that's going to support that. What are the amenities as far as like residence halls and support systems in the school, like academically, but then also socially, because we know that regardless of where you're ending up, it's going to be a transition, right? Like I personally did not feel like I was going to get homesick. I was like, yeah, I'm ready to go to college. And then I get there and I'm like, okay, I'm ready, but I also miss a lot of things about home. I miss a lot of the comfort because it's a lot of change. So making sure you have the social support and academic support is also important, and things that you need to consider too. As far as like Megan said, like do size of institution, location, if there's a religious affiliation, if you identify and want to continue that on in your college level or your college career, then that's definitely important. And then, yeah, so I touched on those other things. Megan, am I missing anything?
You know, I would say one thing that's interesting about, like, when you talk about activities and involvement, I went to a smaller school. Butler's about the same size as Providence, actually. It's like 4,500-ish students. And the thing that was interesting was, I feel like at a school that size, you're definitely running into like the kids that were like big fish in a small pond that want to continue that, right? And so my senior year at Butler, there was a sophomore who was the president of student government, which was like a little bit unheard of, but like a sophomore could be president of student government. That's probably not going to happen at a larger institution, right? There's more students involved in different things. You're kind of working your way through an organization. So if you're somebody who's like, I like being a big fish in a small pond, smaller schools, because of the smaller population, because of kind of that smaller community, you might be able to kind of dive right in with involvement and take leadership roles earlier on. That might be something you care about. It might not be something that matters to you. I think you touched on amenities, residence halls and recreation centers and all of that. Like, again, all of those things that exist at big and small schools. We're going to get to visits. It's its own slide, so don't worry. But I think one thing that I always think about when it comes to like the amenities or like the residence halls and whatever, part of the experience of college is like being away and living in a residence hall and being a part of the school's community wherever you land. And so, yes, it's important that schools have these things, but again, everybody has them. Some might be fancier than others. So you have to kind of weigh again, right? Like what really matters to you? What's like I have to have this? What's something that you're like, this would be nice, but it's not a requirement? And then things that don't matter, because that can help you filter through some of the things that you're going to hear about when you talk to people like Annabelle and I, when you go do these visits or talk to students who are giving your tour. The only other thing that I would say, like just because I work for a school that is Catholic, the religious institution versus not, even at schools like Iowa, there are still like religious organizations, right? So like there's a group for Catholic students, for example, whereas at PC, that's like part of the identity, and it might then require a class or two or something of that nature. So there are going to be slight variances with a school that has a religious identity, possibly, but if that shouldn't be like a non-negotiable, right? Like you can ask those questions and then decide if that school kind of matches up with what you're looking for, versus just like crossing them off the list. That would be my kind of perspective on it. And then lastly, because this kind of ties into like big fish, small pond, the athletics, I think, and this gets into like scholarships and stuff too. If you're an athlete, I think there's a little bit of a different process for you depending on, you know, what division sport you're playing. If you're interested in playing a division level sport, I would definitely start as juniors and even sophomores, because I know we have some sophomores in the group. Start talking to your coaches about that, so that you can kind of figure out from that part of things from that perspective, because it runs concurrently with the admission process, but in some instances, especially if you're talking about a Division I school, the process is separated from admissions, I would say. Other than that, I mean, I feel like that's going to cover personal fit. And like I said, if you have questions, if you're like, what are they talking about? Put it in the Q&A, put it in the chat. We're happy to answer. So I'm going to move Annabelle to the next slide, which is visits in the time of COVID. That's that's where we thought it would be helpful to start. So I'm going to let you take that one.
Oh, yes. Okay. So with campus visits, it's really like every institution is doing something different right now. As we all know, everybody's shifted to a virtual platform in the spring, and some of us are still doing that even now, this 1 year later. So it's really just checking in with institutions. For example, I think Megan, you're only allowing seniors who
Yeah.
are trying to decide on visits, and we've pretty much opened it up to seniors, and now we're allowing juniors. So check in with each institution to see what kind of restrictions there may be based on the state, since it varies state to state. If you are looking to do kind of like a road trip to visit colleges, some, for example, at Iowa, we're only able to accommodate the student and one parent or guardian or guest. And that's not to, we don't want to like not include you in the process, but that's just what we've arranged on our campus. And we're happy to host multiple visits. So if you have to do an initial visit and then later on in your admission cycle, like when you're narrowing down schools and you want to visit again, hopefully by that time we'll be able to accommodate more folks. But something that we have been noticing too is that even though that there are in-person tours at some campuses, the virtual component is still there. So at this point in time, what can you do if you're not able to visit? Really take advantage of those virtual visits. A lot of that, like you can just, follow. Some institutions will record it and so they can send it to you. Many are offering one-on-one appointments. So not only with us admission counselors, but also with our campus partners, faculty and staff and professors on campus. So we do want to make sure that you get connected. I know many of you in the chat have said that this is your first time going through this process, or it's been some time since going through the admissions process. And yes, things have changed, especially this past year, and may continue on into this next year. That's exactly why Megan and I are in our roles, are really to communicate with families and share things that you may need clarification for on the website, or just getting that personal connection, because we would hate to drive you to the web for everything. There are things that we know just off the top of our head that we can share with you and can connect with you with people on campus, but then also students on campus. So I know that interaction is missing too. Unless you know somebody who attends a school that you're interested in learning more about. If you don't know someone, we can get that connection for you too. Go ahead, Megan.
The thing that I would say about this, you all are going to go through a process that, in my opinion, is going to start virtual and then transition to in-person opportunities. So to Annabelle's point, take advantage of the virtual stuff while it's there, because I think that's a way to like at least just get the general lay of the land. What does this school offer? What kinds of opportunities are available to me as a student? And then, once you are a little bit farther through the process, you can really start thinking about doing visits and getting to cities and getting to campuses to go visit some of these places, right? Like, to me, that's what makes sense, just given COVID. And, coming from a state where Rhode Island is a little bit different in terms of the numbers, obviously the state is really small. So like, they really aren't looking for like huge increases, and an increase here in Illinois is like totally different than what it would look like in Rhode Island, given the population, right? So you just have to be mindful of schools and where they're at. So they might be, I know that we're not the only ones that are only allowing seniors on campus, because seniors really haven't been to campus. We want to get them first. So there are going to be schools that do that. So that's when I think it's a great pivot to say, okay, we're going to do the virtual stuff for schools X, Y, and Z. And then we know that if we like these 3 schools, we'll go visit them, maybe over the summer or even in early fall, when things are hopefully looking a little bit better in terms of numbers. I think the reason that we have this in here, the reason we wanted to talk about visits and to kind of go through this all with you, is because visits really tie back to, I think, learning about how you fit into a campus. We would never want you to go somewhere where you've never visited, right? The personal fit really, to me, relies on you getting to the campus to see, like, how do I fit in? Can I see this place as my future home? I always feel like I have done my job when a student is saying, I'm going home, and they mean they're coming to Providence. Parents might be like cringing at that, but that's really when we've done our job, right, Annabelle? That like their students are starting to mix up, like I'm going home and they're coming back to PC. And so the visit is really the way to figure that out. But I think you can still take advantage of and utilize these virtual programs in order to get some of the just general stuff out of the way. The size of the school, where, where it's located, not just like, okay, it's in Providence, but what does that mean? What is Providence like, right? What is Iowa City like? And then you can figure out, what they offer academically, what kinds of opportunities are available for undecided students, the student organizations. You can do all of that through these virtual programs and then see it for yourself in person a little bit later on. And schools, the last thing I will say about this, the COVID thing, I would just make sure that if you are able to visit, like I'm assuming Annabelle, you probably have like, here's a thing that you have to fill out, or we want you to do X, Y, and Z when you come to campus. So just make sure you're following those procedures so that you have like a smooth and stress-free visit to those places. Okay. Let's talk about finances. Oh my gosh, you guys, this is the most exciting part of the presentation, right? Obviously. Okay. Annabelle and I would definitely tell you, this is the time. We've already told you, like, it's good to have conversations all throughout these three different components, right? Like, what am I good at? Like, what do I like to do? What can I study? What are things I want to be involved in? What's important to me when it comes to my personal fit to a school? But more importantly, when it comes to finances, what kinds of financial, situations are we dealing with as a family? What can we afford? What's reasonable? What should I be expected to take on as a student? All of those things. I think the more honest you all can be as a family, the better off you'll be come this time when Annabelle and I are working with families who are like, we still are looking for financial assistance because maybe they didn't have those conversations earlier on. So we want to talk through just some general financial aid stuff so that you're kind of aware of this. So let's talk through merit aid, because I think there's some confusion about what the two things are and how they kind of work. So merit aid can be a variety of different things. Merit aid could be a scholarship that you receive from an institution for your academic abilities, for your overall application. For many institutions, it seems like schools have allowed that process to be included in the initial review. So you would get a decision and a scholarship. You might have to apply for some scholarships, but it's typically based on your academic profile and maybe a few other things. You can see on here talent. Talent is also a merit-based award in that it doesn't typically look at any financial things. So talent could be you're getting athletic money. Maybe you received a scholarship because you're a music major and there's a talent award for that. Maybe you have received a scholarship because of your leadership or your service. So those are all ways in which a school might award you a scholarship. And like I said, many times it could be included in the process of applying to the school, but it also might be an application that you require. But that's why people like Annabelle and I exist, because we can help answer those questions for our respective schools. So then on the alternate side of merit aid, or the other kind of aid, is need-based aid. So need-based aid is what you're expecting. You fill out the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. It spits out a number. They're actually changing this process. So there's some good that's coming with changing that process, but essentially need-based aid, that's going to be a loan that you take out. You could be receiving a grant. So a grant is going to be money that you receive that you do not have to pay back. So it looks like a scholarship in that capacity, but a grant is given to you because of your financial need, if that makes sense. And then student work study, that's typically the other thing that falls under need-based assistance. So you would receive student work study, which means the work that you do on campus, the job that you get, would be supplemented by the government. So those are typically the types of aid that you'll see. The last one that you see on the screen is private. And essentially what that means is there are private entities that have scholarships out there. I'm going to guess if we asked Taylor, Ms. Travers, that she would say that there's probably some kind of list that Antioch keeps of community organizations and businesses and things like that that have contacted Antioch to say, we have a scholarship that we want to advertise for our area students. So that could be the Chamber of Commerce, the Lions Club. I'm trying to think of what else. Like Coca-Cola has a scholarship, McDonald's has scholarships. Those are the ones that like thousands upon thousands of people apply for. Your Chamber of Commerce, though, they might have an award. And actually, Annabelle's colleague, his wife used to work at a Chamber of Commerce. They had 3 people one year, the last year that they had this scholarship, they had 3 people apply for 2 awards, right? 3 people, that's it, right? You're in a pool of 3. You feel sorry for the one kid that didn't get the money, but like, I think students assume that some of those like Lions Club, Chamber of Commerce, like those kinds of local-ish awards have a lot of students applying, and they don't always. So if you're a family that is looking for additional assistance, students, this is like an easy thing to start looking at now. FastWeb is a good resource. I can put some in the chat, some different websites that you all can utilize to kind of look for these different private opportunities. And then lastly, there are FAFSA workshops that happen kind of throughout Illinois. You can find more information about how to fill out the FAFSA. It's not necessarily hard. It's time consuming. It's kind of like doing your taxes. And then the last thing that I will tell you is that many schools, all schools have a net price calculator on their website. Some are going to be more in depth than others, but it will at least give you a general idea of either merit and need-based aid that you could receive from that institution. They might just say, you know, if you fill out the net price calculator, we'll show you what kind of merit you could receive. Some might say, here's just the need-based aid you could receive. So everybody does it a little differently, but that can give you a general sense of what your family might be responsible for in terms of overall costs. Okay. The most fun part is over. We're going to talk about applications just to give you a little bit of an idea of like, okay, once we figured all of this stuff out, what happens next? So Annabelle, I'm going to let you take this from the beginning.
Okay. So every application process is going to look different. It's really important to either get connected with the admission counselor or just go directly to the website for information or get connected with your high school counselor. Because when students are applying, we look at transcripts. That's pretty much across the board, pretty consistent. Standardized test scores. This is where it can get tricky, right? Because you're hearing these words like test optional, test blind, test flexible. It means something different at every institution, and I don't want families to be uninformed that test optional means the same at my institution and means the same at Megan's institution. For example, at the University of Iowa, we are test flexible. And what that means is that you can apply for admission without a test score, but at this current time, you can choose to submit a test score later on for scholarship consideration. So it's not required for admission, but students still have the option to send it, or they can apply for admission for using a test score. Whereas Megan, you want to talk about what it looks like or what it means at Providence?
Yeah, so for us, we actually have been test optional for like over a decade. So we legitimately just don't even need test scores anymore at all. But that, I think, to Annabelle's point about the test flexible, like it's all very confusing. I know that, you know that, Annabelle, like it's just how it is. So for us, really, if a student doesn't submit a test score, we don't care. It doesn't matter, because what we're focusing on then is their academic record. So like, what kind of high school do they attend? What kinds of opportunities are available at that high school? What kinds of classes did they take? How did they perform in those classes? That really becomes kind of the kind of focus of the quantitative part of the stuff that we have. And really what you're seeing on here, the transcript, the test scores, essays, letters of recommendation, these are all going to be required of you at some schools, and at some places you might only be required to do 2 of these things or 3 of these things. Activity lists are also part of this. They're usually just part of the application. But it's going to be different at each place, like how they look at the overall application itself. And this is probably where, and Annabelle, you can agree or disagree, but I would say that this is probably the biggest difference between like a public school and a private school in terms of how they review or what they ask you to submit. So like at Providence, you're turning in the transcript, the essays, the letters of rec, and we've got your activity list as part of the application. But for Iowa, you guys require what of this list?
If you are applying, you see, it depends. So if
Yeah.
you're applying without a test score, we will require transcript and a personal statement. And letters of recommendation are not required. But yeah, if you're applying with a test score, we don't need those additional pieces. So it just depends. And that's why it's important to ask, because it can get very confusing just based on those 2 differences.
So someone in the chat was like, are those scholarships like the Chamber of Commerce scholarships, Lions Club, all of those, are those 1 year or do they cover 4 years? Our favorite answer for everything is, as Annabelle literally just said, it depends. And that's why it becomes like super important to talk to your counselors in Antioch to find your people like Annabelle and I. So Annabelle and I both work with Antioch students. And they have, or you all have at Antioch, a way to get connected to counselors for the respective schools that have come to visit Antioch and that have a relationship with Antioch. But let's say you're looking at somewhere in Canada and you're like, does somebody work with Illinois students from this school in Canada, McGill in Canada? Yes, the short answer is yes. So every school has someone that works with either part of part of the Chicagoland area, the state of Illinois. I'm from a school farther away, so I actually have all of the Midwest. Annabelle just has a part of the Chicagoland area because Iowa gets so many Illinois students. But we're going to be able to help answer some of these questions for you, right? Like, okay, if I'm applying to Iowa, should I submit a test score? Annabelle can help answer that, right? Or if you're at PC, what do you want me to talk about in my essay? These are the kinds of things that we can help with, but typically these are the requirements that a school is going to ask for as part of the application. And then deadlines, this is a little different from school to school as well, but these are the terms that you will see, and we just wanted to run through these quickly with you. Rolling admission, Annabelle, I'm gonna let you take that one because that's what you guys do.
Yeah, so rolling admission is that institutions will continue to receive applications until they feel like they have enough applications or have admitted enough students to fill that incoming class. So there may be a point in the process to say, we have already received too many applications. We can't really admit students. We might have to go to a wait list. And so I would say and Megan, you can dive into the other 2, but in general, it's safer to apply earlier in the process rather than later. And we can go into specifics after the other 2.
So early action, early decision, and then regular decision are going to be the ones that you see that there's like a specific deadline. So rolling admission, there might be like you have to apply by this day, but it's like towards the end of the school year. Whereas early decision, early action, those are probably going to be dates. Maybe it's November 1st, November 15th, December 1st, something like that, where a school says, in order to be considered for early action, let's start there, you have to apply by November 1st. And what that essentially means is everything has to be like postmarked or sent in, submitted by November 1st. So what's the difference? Like, does it matter? So the biggest difference is early decision is like, I think it's a big deal. So you have to be pretty committed. Like, this is my number 1, like Providence has early decision. So what I tell students is you only wear black and white clothes, right? Those are school colors. You've been going to Providence basketball games your whole life. You can't see yourself going anywhere but PC. And you'd be willing to go there without seeing a financial aid package because you wouldn't have one. And you would say, okay, if I'm getting in, I'm withdrawing my application to all of these other places. That's the level of commitment that we're talking about with early decision. Are a lot of students at that point? No, and that's okay. That's what early action is for. Early action basically says, I want to apply early to hear early. And to Annabelle's point, that's typically where I guide or direct students to, is early action, because it allows students to get their application in. They can be considered for scholarships, but there's nothing binding requiring them to have made a decision. They still have until May 1st to make that final decision. Okay. So
And I think the
go.
important thing to think about too with early action is, yes, you've applied early, you're meeting deadlines earlier on. We understand and realize that the financial piece may not come together until spring, right? But we want to make sure that you've submitted FAFSA, we're communicating with you. The best way to stay organized is learn to love Excel or Google Sheets, right? Like especially if you're looking at multiple schools, you want to make sure that all that information is organized now that every school has different deadlines and different requirements of what on things to submit. So that's the easiest way. Yes, thanks, Megan, on how to stay organized. And that leads us into our last section of like things that we think you need to know based on our experience here. But Megan, did you want to start
Yeah,
off?
you've covered like a couple of them, right? Stay organized because of like scholarships, special programs, admission deadlines. Those two things are really connected, right? Like we don't want you to miss out on those things. It's heartbreaking as someone that works in an admission office to see somebody miss a deadline because they're not checking their email, they're not staying organized. So if it's calendar reminders, spreadsheets, whatever, go for it. My thing is focus on what you can control. There's like a lot of noise that's going to come with this. I heard this family told me this. Some of it's true. Some of it is nowhere near the truth. So focus on, okay, we're going to visit these schools. We're going to do these virtual visits. I'm going to put everything in a spreadsheet. Like that's the stuff that you can control. So focus on that stuff.
So
Yeah,
Megan,
go.
in the chat, we have a family asking, can you provide an example of spreadsheet and with the important information? So mainly just like what institution you're applying to, what are the deadlines, maybe what's required to submit to the school, like a transcript, a test score, letters of recommendation. So you're basically checking off boxes or marking deadlines, housing deadlines, financial aid and scholarship application deadlines for each particular school. So it's all in one place. And what Megan said is sometimes you can just then take that information and plug calendar reminders. Iowa is really great about like over communicating and sending a lot of emails. So you will definitely get reminders from us, but not every school is at that level of, constant communication. So that's why we're just encouraging you to keep track of those things on your own. And maybe it's not a Google Sheet, maybe it's just a notebook for you, but hopefully that's helpful.
I would also say, if you are using your school email, I think that's okay for college stuff. I would almost tell you, because we're still early on in this process, to just create a new email solely for college stuff. I'm a Gmail person, so I'm going to say Gmail just because that's what I know. And the reason I say that is because there's actually 4 tabs that you can have in Gmail, right? So what I usually tell students is by the time we get to this point in senior year, when students are like narrowing their list down, you can then filter all of the places where you've applied and been admitted to the important tab because you can see those. And then the other ones that they can be in one of the other tabs, if that makes sense. Like a lot of schools are going to over communicate, and a lot of us communicate via email. Students are probably groaning listening to me say this, but that's how we communicate. Yes, you'll get phone calls. You probably won't answer the phone, but we will call you to remind you of stuff. Sometimes you'll get texts, but email is really like the big way now that we communicate. We don't even send as many letters as we did when Annabelle and I started, just because email has become kind of the de facto way of communicating. So finding a way to organize it all and maybe creating the email solely for college that everybody has access to, parents and students, that's maybe an easy way to do it. And keeping in touch with us. That's what we're here for. People like Annabelle and I exist to help you through the process, to answer questions, to be a resource. That's why we're around. So don't be, hesitant or feel weird about emailing us and saying, I'm looking for some help or whatever, like that's what we're here to do. And have fun with it. Like, I know that that seems maybe hard after getting all of this information, but we do want you to have fun. This is a place that now becomes your second home. It's a place you're connected to the rest of your life. And so we want it to be the right decision, a good decision. You're going to end up with 2 or 3 schools that you would be great at. And I think students get caught up in there's one right place for me. And that's just not true. By the time you get to this point in senior year, you'll have lots of options, or hopefully a smaller amount of options, but recognizing that you'll be good at all of those places, that you'd be happy at any of those places. I think that's all that I would say. Is there any other tidbits, Annabelle, that you want to touch on?
No, I think, well, other than students, this is your
yeah.
process. Like, yeah, definitely parents, your recommendations and just your input is very important as part of the process. But students, like, you are the ones who are going to be in the classroom, getting involved on campus, but also just keep your family informed, you know, like they want to be a part of the process. And right now, if you can take the initiative to advocate for yourself, I think that's the greatest piece that you'll learn in this process that's going to help you in your, when you're independent and at college. We have a lot of resources to help you be successful, but what we often or may see sometimes is that students don't want to ask for help, or they don't know where to go exactly. And so if you're practicing now on asking the questions, learning and finding the information for yourself, or just knowing to lean on your support system, that's going to make you successful wherever you go. But again, just circling back to what Megan said, the last point is just have fun. A lot of colleges are on Instagram and doing like challenges and doing student takeovers. So there's a way for you to get connected. There's a way for you to just get excited, even though you're not able to visit some campuses now. I do see that we have some questions in the chat, so I don't know if we just want to dive in there right
so
away.
If you want to take a quick screenshot of this, we're happy to answer questions beyond tonight. I think that's one of the most important things to me, like in a virtual setting, like the conversation doesn't have to end tonight. You can email us or give us a call. So take a quick screenshot. Obviously, this is being recorded, so those who are watching the recording, you've got it there. I saw that there's a question about early decision, so let me get to that one. With early decision, can you apply to other colleges until you find out if you're admitted? Yes, of course you can. Apply to all of the places that you want to. It's when you get admitted, the expectation is that if you were admitted early decision somewhere, that you then withdraw your applications to those other places. And then there's another question. What is the, Annabelle, I'm going to let you take this one, unless you want me to answer it.
Sure.
What is the advantage of going straight to university versus doing a couple of years at community college and then transferring to a larger school?
I don't really think that I mean, it's all about what is the best fit for the family, right? So, and it depends. So advantages of going to a straight university, sometimes when you apply, your scholarship is over the course of 4 years. For us in particular, like our non-resident scholarship, if you decide to start at a community college, then unfortunately that's not also going to apply for when you apply as a transfer student. So you have to look at the overall cost of, okay, what was I awarded as an incoming student? And we know the benefits of starting at a community college and saving money and getting general education courses done. But if it's going to equal out to be the same cost, it might be best for you to just start at that institution, a 4-year institution right away. Should you choose to apply, like go to CLC, CLC has articulation agreements with many different colleges. So, if it's a matter of saving money, you can definitely get a lot of courses done there. And you may already be doing that now through dual enrollment, and that will just carry over with you. So I think it's just that scholarship piece. For us, we don't really offer scholarships to students that are transferring in from 4-year institutions, because that's not our intention to pull a student from another school, but we do offer some scholarships for students who are applying from 2-year institutions or community colleges. So some things to think about, but I don't know that other than the financial piece, and maybe I think that's the biggest thing that I would consider, but also just looking to see, depending on your major, some majors want you to get there sooner rather than later. For example, our engineering is very sequential. And so Ideally, if you want to start at a community college, we would only advise for you to do 1 year. Same goes for biology. There's only a certain level that you can complete, at a community college before you run out of, the classes to take and you have to transfer. So Megan, did you want to add to that?
I think your point about the money is important. Most schools don't give as large of scholarships or don't have as many scholarship opportunities for transfer students because you're really only there for 2 years probably. So I think that's something to keep in mind. But like you can also look at the bottom line, right? So that we've had students at previous institutions that I've worked for that have done the math. Like I apply and I got accepted, I got this scholarship. So what does that math look like of, okay, I have this scholarship and it removes the costs for 4 years. And that brings my bottom line to this. If I transfer, here's the cost of CLC for 2 years. Here's my cost for this institution for 2 years with a little bit of financial aid. What does that look like? They may be the same. They might look totally different. So it's probably worth it if you're debating to at least go through the process, see what happens, and then make a decision. And that's the nice thing. You've got plenty of time. So I would say that at working through some of those things, I think it's okay to do that and then figure out maybe at the end of this year, at the end of your senior year, what that would look like. Scott, I see question. Can I start answering some of these questions?
You can jump right in if you choose see them and would like to. I'm also happy to try to do my best Vanna White impersonation here, if that's helpful at all.
So the question that I am looking at is this COVID question. So I'm not sure who asked this, but this is like a really great question. How has the admission process changed since COVID? How do colleges or have colleges accounted for students who have struggled academically? This has been a huge conversation for us. We utilize a slightly different admission process than Iowa. And so as a private school person where the review is going to look different and there are committee reviews and second reads and all of those kinds of things, though that's been a lot of our conversation in this past year especially, right? Because you want to give grace to the students who clearly had like rock star stellar academics, and then all of a sudden there's this weird blip, and the blip is COVID, and the counselor accounts for it, the student addresses it. Like at some institutions, especially if it's super competitive, that might be a non-starter. But for many places like mine, like private schools, smaller schools, those conversations around the struggles that students are having are real. They are happening. And I want you to know that we work for the Office of Admission, right? And so our goal is to admit students. We want to find students who are good fits to our school, but we also understand what you all are going through. We're going through this too, right? Maybe from a different lens or angle or whatever, but I think know that those things are addressed in second reads and in committee reviews. And we've had those conversations as a staff. Annabelle, I'm sure that you've done the same of like, how do we account for these things that we know that we're going to see in a transcript? And how can we make sure that we don't miss out on a student because their GPA dropped or they've had some issues, but it's because of this very real thing that students are going through. So you can certainly ask that question of any school that you're applying to, because everyone's going to look at it a little bit differently. But I just know that from just a general perspective, we're all having those conversations and want to be sensitive to how we work with students with those struggles that they've seen. I don't know if that's helpful. I mean, it's hard to say a more general answer because I think every school is going to look at this a little bit differently, but don't feel worried. Address the question directly. Tell us what's going on. Know that we are really happy to help walk you through, okay, like let's figure out maybe if there's something else that you can do, or maybe it's getting an extra letter. Maybe the school is going to say, we want you to do an interview. Like some of those things could happen, but I think it's in your best interest to just address that with the school directly. What else is in here?
Well, thanks. That's I think, a question on a lot of folks' minds. It's just how COVID has changed things. But some other ones that are maybe some softer balls for you and Annabelle for a second, Megan. Is summer an okay time to visit schools, or is it better to go in the fall? Was one question.
I think again, it depends. We offer summer tours, and some folks have a limited capacity. So I would just inquire and see. There are benefits to visiting in the fall, but again, it might look a little bit different just based on the restrictions of the institution. Normally, we would invite families to visit in the fall because that's when students are on campus. That's when all the hustle and bustle is happening and events that are happening on campus. So sometimes you need to feel and see that kind of energy to know if it is a good fit. But at this point, I would say just visit when you can. That's kind of what I'm telling families now. Like, you can explore an institution. Like, Iowa is only like a 4-hour drive from Antioch. So you can visit now, just get like a general feel. And then as things open up a little bit more, then we would love for you to visit a second time.
I had a totally different answer. So I actually worked for Butler, and then I worked for Marquette. So my answer back at working for those places was like, you definitely need to visit when school is in session. I now work for a school that requires you to hop on a plane. I mean, you could drive, but it's a little bit of a drive to get to Providence, Rhode Island. Summer is actually a great time to come to Providence, to Rhode Island, to the East Coast. So I think it's going to depend too on where the school is. Maybe the family's taking a vacation. To Annabelle's point, like, you thought you were going to get on a plane, right, to go to college. So maybe the family's going to Arizona this summer, or they're going to California, or going to Texas, or you're coming to Rhode Island, you're going to Boston. Like, make sure to plan some of those trips and get some of those visits. Know that a smaller school, it's going to be quieter, but I don't think there's any harm, especially once the school allows for junior visitors, to do those visits over the summer. Just walk in knowing, okay, it's going to be quiet. There aren't going to be as many people, but I'm still going to get the info that I need. And then you could potentially do something, later on, some kind of visit later. So.
Thanks, guys. I'm not sure if we answered this one or not. Another question was, what is the advantage of going straight to university versus doing a couple of years at community college and then transferring to a larger school? Was that one that you already grabbed, Megan?
Annabelle got that one.
Yep, I thought so. Thank you.
One that I want to, I just saw this one. This thing about the emails and the letters. This is a long one. I'm gonna try to synthesize this one. So you're a sophomore. You've gotten a bunch of you probably have a bunch of emails and mail from colleges claiming we want to get to know you. We're sending you stuff to like explain all of the stuff that we offer. And they're saying they're from the Office of Admission. Should you be responding, and what to do with that stuff? One, I would never throw anything away or recycle it without looking through it first. Yes, it is coming from our office, from the admission office. So it's going to be helpful in just, again, getting the lay of the land of that school. Sometimes we will send emails that look like they're coming from Annabelle or I. This is an insider scoop. If you're still here with us, here's your insider tip for this evening. Sometimes you'll get an email and it's like, "Dear Scott, hi, I'm Megan O'Rourke. I'm your admission counselor at Providence College. I didn't send that to you. We have an office or a person, usually it's a person or a couple of people, that create these emails that send them out, just like you would get an email from Old Navy. Hey, Scott, shorts are 50% off, right? But in the same way that you get those emails from Old Navy and from Gap and wherever else you shop, we can then see, are you opening them? Are you reading them? Or did the email bounce? So we have similar ways to kind of figure out, is this student interested in what we're sending them or not? So I try to send like a note to students that I have. And so I think you can tell, Annabelle, right? Like if I'm sending you an email, you can see the difference between what I call like a fancy HTML email versus just like I type something in Outlook or Gmail or whatever and sent it to you. So know that we have systems that kind of allow us to send these mass communications to just get you information, because that's a lot of what it is in the beginning. You are certainly welcome to respond to those. Those will go back. A person is reading them. A person is responding to them. But it might have been sent to, all of the interested students from this part of the country or this specific high school or whatever it is. Does that help to the sophomore that asked that question? I hope so.
Thanks. Megan, Annabelle, can you guys help with another question? How can you or should you negotiate the cost of tuition, especially if you've been accepted to multiple schools?
Yeah, we're getting that question, at least at Iowa, a lot. And I think there is some just chatter that that's a possibility. As a public institution, unfortunately, we're not even able to negotiate costs. It's tuition fees, whatever merit aid you're getting, exactly what Megan went over. We're not able to match scholarships that are offered from different schools. And this is part of our counseling background, although it's hard for us to say we can't compete with that school. The schools that you've been admitted to are a great option. You can't really go wrong. So do pick what's the best fit for you. There might be opportunities to be considered for additional scholarship, but they often require sending updated transcripts. So maybe you applied at the end of your junior year, but you did really well senior year. At Iowa, you can submit new transcripts, and the deadline to submit that is April 1st. So as long as you submit it by that, we can reevaluate your transcript to see if you would qualify for additional merit aid. Same goes for the ACT or SAT. So if you took the test up until the February test date, we will review new scores for potential scholarship increases. So that's the only way that we can really reevaluate, but we're not able to negotiate tuition or scholarships, unfortunately.
And I don't know if I think about it like that. I would say that many institutions are doing the same things that Annabelle are doing, public or private. Like lots of schools try to provide, here's our best offer in terms of scholarships and financial aid. I think this is a little bit of a different time because families are submitting tax information from a year in which their financial situation could be different because of COVID. There have been schools that have had to address that, or families want, Providence or Iowa or whomever to reassess their financial aid because there's been a loss of a job or something like that, loss of income. We've seen a lot of that. So I don't want to tell you not to ask those questions. You certainly can, but I think you should go into it expecting hey, there isn't more money to give. There are ways to appeal financial aid, but it's typically for these kinds of situations: loss of a job, loss of income, extreme medical expenses, which we have also seen, which is none of it's happy, right? So some of those things can be addressed with financial aid appeals, but not at every school. Again, it's going to be different from place to place. And that's why we keep harping on this. We're like broken records, right? It's important to keep in touch with people like Annabelle and I, because we can help you figure out the answer at Iowa looks different than the answer at Providence, then looks different at the answer at the University of Illinois or at Marquette or at Butler or wherever, right? The answer varies from place to place. So you can ask us directly, hey, are there opportunities for more scholarship? Could I be reevaluated? Or, we had this financial situation. Can we appeal our financial aid? And we'll be able to help answer that for you and then help you figure out what you would need to do if that is a process that's allowed.
Thanks, ladies. Another one of our guests asked, are there scholarships that we referenced earlier usually 1 year, or do they cover all 4 years? And I can start that one and then you two can contribute. We're lucky to have a bunch of organizations that have jumped into a local scholarship application that our counseling team assembles each year and shares to our senior students to apply towards. And that gets you access to a number of local scholarships within the Antioch community area. Some of those are 1 year awards, and some of those are renewable year to year. And so that's delineated in each individual scholarship that students apply towards. Sometimes that renewal is on the basis of meeting certain criteria year to year. almost always in continued enrollment. Other ones are one-time gifts. And so that's a variable piece. Megan, Annabelle, anything to add to that?
I am trying to type. There's a couple of websites that I usually direct students to. Peters. I'm trying to do this and talk at the same time. So scholarships.com, fastwet.com, Peterson's, and College Board are four that I point people to. You should never be paying for somebody to like look for scholarships for you. These are all free resources and they should be free resources. These are the ones where the big ones are. So just be mindful of that. I think what Scott is referencing, that's, to me, those are the more like realistic ones. Like there aren't maybe going to be as many applicants. So those would be good ones to take advantage of.
Yeah, with the local ones, certainly, I think that was where Megan referenced that, there's not, you're competing with your classmates locally, not with a national pool of candidates for perhaps a limited number of scholarships. Both are great opportunities for students to consider.
Yeah.
Another question rolled in, ladies. Love this one. What is the most common trap families fall into when it comes to college admissions?
Believing all of the things that they hear to be true, I would say. Like, oh, well, we heard Iowa's doing this. And then Annabelle has to be like, that's not true, right? Come to us. We'll answer the questions. Come to Ms. Travers and your other counselors at Antioch. We can help you figure out what you need to know. Like I said at the beginning of this, there's a lot of noise with college admissions. There's stuff in the papers. There's stuff on the news. Sometimes some of that stuff is helpful and sometimes it's not. I think focusing on what you can control in all of this is just, it will eliminate some of the stress and anxiety that comes with this process. Annabelle?
I would have to agree. I'm trying to think of like, I wouldn't say it's a trap, but I just think that if you're disorganized in the process, you can just think information can get confusing. So that's why we want to just stress to stay organized, because you may think that one institution had a particular deadline for scholarship, but it was really another institution. Again, trying to do everything on the front end and then asking questions, allowing yourself to ask questions after that. Or like follow up.
I think you guys addressed this in some ways, but we can maybe recap it again. Aside from grades and test scores, what kind of outside things are colleges like Iowa or Providence looking for in applications?
So for Iowa, we don't take into account extracurricular activities unless we're reviewing for scholarships or the honors program. But if you are applying without a test score, we are going to make sure that you're focusing on core classes. So those are English, language arts, math, science, even computer science, like upper level computer science courses would count. And taking those well until the end of your senior year. Obviously, take classes that are going to be appropriate for your level. And what you're ready for. Don't try to like take all the AP classes if you're not feeling like you're ready for that, especially now, and communicate that. Like if you decided not to take AP psychology and just take regular psychology, but you want us to know why you made that decision, feel free to include that on your personal statement, because again, we won't know that unless you're including that in your statement. So yes, we want to have grace when we're reviewing your application to say you're not the best online learner at the time, so that's why you decided to take this class. But then especially your senior year, we want you to continue to challenge yourself, because that's going to help you your first semester wherever you decide to go.
100%. I would say because Providence is private, like I said, we do look at those other things. So when it comes to private schools, and this is my experience at all three of these institutions, we look at your activities and your involvement, but that could mean a lot of different things. So that could be, you've done a bunch of service, you're in student government, you sing in choir, you play soccer, whatever it is, great. Maybe you have to do, you're in charge of your little siblings, right? Like there's family responsibilities. I tell students to put that stuff in their activity list because that's what they're doing outside of class. If you work because you are going to have to help pay for school and you have a job, put that stuff in there. I would say it's not like I'm sitting there like, okay, check box soccer team, check box newspaper. It's not like that. It's how does this student spend their time outside of class? To me, it's helpful to know what a student is doing, because I think that shows us this student has good time management because they're able to balance all of these things, and manage a schedule, which is what you'll have to do when you get to college. And those are the kinds of students that kind of dive right in when they get to college. When they get to our campus, they're like, I want to be involved and I want to be an active part of the community. So that's always helpful to see. With the essay, Annabelle touching on specific things, and I think that's really important. It is inherently an English exercise. So like spelling and grammar, all of that stuff counts. It doesn't have to be structured like an English essay. Moms and dads in the group. It doesn't have to have your intro. If there's English teachers too, they're probably cringing at this. It doesn't have to have your intro, 3-body, conclusion, format. That's okay if it doesn't look that way. This is a way for you to be creative. I read a few poems this year, which I thought was fun. We read a screenplay, which we thought was really fun. It was very short, but it was still fun. I think students can be creative because this allows us to see kind of who you are. We get to learn more about you. It is personally my favorite part of the application, because we then get a sense of all of these things about you that we're not getting in the other parts to your application. But that's really the focus, though. The focus should be you as a student in that. And then your letters of rec, Taylor can write a great letter about your growth as a student, right? Or one of your teachers here at Antioch can talk about, I had them as a sophomore and now I have them as a senior, and it's been great to see how they've grown up and they've matured, and this is the kind of student they are. They're engaged, and maybe they struggled, but they ask a bunch of questions and they've come to me for help. Those are the kinds of things that we like learning. And that's really the kind of student that many schools are going to be looking for, is someone that can advocate for themselves, that can manage their schedule, and that shows us who they are. Because as much as it's you finding your fit, it's us ensuring that we have found a fit in you, right? So there was a student, and I just sent a link. I don't know if the student is still there or not, but there was a question about like being undecided and having a lot of interests. I'll actually put this in the chat too, for those of you that are interested. So College Board has this website called Big Future, sorry. That might be a place to start in just exploring majors. I wish this would have existed. I was undecided when I came to college. Many schools offer exploratory, undecided, undeclared. Annabelle, what do you guys call it? It has a name. I can't.
Open major.
Open.
Yeah.
Open. So everybody's got a different name for it, and it's some are more structured than others. But if you're undecided, you can come in undecided. That's totally okay. You'll still be on track to graduate. You're going to have some help figuring out what it is you like, what it is you're good at, and where those two things intersect, because that's typically where the dream job kind of lives, in my opinion. So hopefully, to whoever asked that question, that website can help at least maybe get you to start thinking. But no, it's okay to come in undecided too. We don't care. We're happy to kind of help guide you through that first year or so as you figure those things out.
Thanks. I think it's also a great opportunity for a student to connect with their school counselor at ACHS. We have an amazing team of counselors there, and that's a role they love to play in partnership with our students, is to help them navigate that choice and those future career ideas. We have some nice tools that we employ as a school as well to help us with that process. And so we can help students get set up and rolling with those tools, and allow those to be things that families can talk about as home as well, and continue the conversation outside of the counselor office. So definitely something to bring up with your school counselor at ACHS.
Cool.
Ladies, how early can people start applying to college?
The Common App opens, and Common App, for those not familiar, Common App is a generalized college application. Over 800, I think, schools across the country accept it. It's probably more now, but that opens in early August. And that's typically when I tell students that's like usually a good time. You haven't started school yet. You can maybe try to get things moving before school starts and everything gets really busy. And to Annabelle's point, I think earlier is better, right? The earlier you can do things, the more time you have to make sure you've gotten everything done.
Yeah, I would
intermediate.
agree. So as long as you've completed your junior year, because ultimately your transcripts need to show your cumulative GPA up until the end of your junior year, as when I tell students, so yeah, summertime, but if you apply in the summer, which some students get to our institutional app through our website, you won't hear until like mid to late August on your admission decision. So August is a great time to just start thinking about applying, but you can do your research up until that point, which is great.
Is there a difference between your personal statement and your essay, or are those the same?
I sometimes use those terms interchangeably, but they're not always the same. So essay typically can refer to like the essay in the Common App. That's what it's referred to. But like what Annabelle is talking about, Iowa's not the only school that does that, where they say like a personal statement, but it's pretty specific in what they're asking you to talk about, right, Annabelle? Like academically.
Yeah, and so again, it'll depend. So for students who are applying that need to submit, I guess, yeah, I use those words interchangeably as well. But we will give you, like on the Common App, use this prompt, or you can always ask. Some schools ask for specific things, or if it's a personal statement, sometimes it's addressing extenuating circumstances that may not have been reflected in your transcripts or test scores. So say, for example, you had a rough semester because one of your family members were sick or you were sick, and so that really impacted your grades, or maybe you were living in a pandemic and that impacted your grades. So you want to make sure that you're addressing that, so that when we're reviewing your transcript, we can say, okay, yes, that's where the semester that you had that challenging thing going on, but since then there's been an upward trend. So those are the things that we wouldn't know without you sharing that information. So it really just depends on what you're trying to relay. And if you need to express those additional things, then it's more of a personal statement, whereas an essay is addressing one of those questions or prompts that we will provide.
Mhm.
Thanks, Annabelle. Again, one of our guests also asked about a reference earlier that we've made to a spreadsheet and a Google Sheet to help with just weighing different admissions factors and features of colleges, and asked if we had one that we could share. We don't have one that is a school counseling team we specifically endorse at ACHS. Certainly, if you hop on the Google machine, you can search and find a number of those out there. And I think what we think is really important is that students are weighing what factors they want to include in their personal search and making sure that those align with their values and their interests. Not all those factors are created equal. And so for every student, that's a little bit different and a little bit unique to their needs and their interests. If you would like some help making one of those, again, like that's where our school counselors love to work with our students side by side. And so definitely chat with the counselor to get one of those off the ground and running. But we want that to be something that you as a student have mindfully considered and not just grabbed and used. Annabelle, Megan, anything to add to that, or is that okay? Thumbs up to that Megan gave me, so I love it. We got one more question here to field, I think, and certainly any other audience members that want to throw something into the Q&A, please do so here in the next minute. We would love to wrap up still and respect your time this evening and let Megan and Annabelle go. They've been amazing guests for us tonight and hosts here along with me. Ladies, this is a great question though. Do special education needs, either 504 or individual education plan, impact admissions? And I think it's a whole second question that I'll pause and come back to after you guys be able to field that one first.
They can, yes. I know that I've had students that have been worried about disclosing that, but like if you didn't take a language, for example, and the school requires a language, that's an easy way to say like, hey, like I have this IEP and I don't take a language in high school. Like instead of us guessing why you didn't take it, that's an easy way to just say like, hey, I don't have one and here's why. Okay, like that's not, that isn't going to negatively impact your chance of admission. It just helps kind of provide some context to what we're seeing when we look at the transcript.
I would agree with that, Megan. It's just more information that we need to know as far as like piecing everything together.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say, unless it's, I really don't have anything to add to that. But for Iowa specifically, once you've been admitted, then we would refer you to work with Student Disability Services so that you can work with our services on campus for any additional accommodations that you would need. Now, the question with what type of mental health support is available at the college level, I would definitely reach out. That is a question that many students are asking, and I'm happy that students are asking that. So when you are working with different colleges on, or starting to do your research, make sure you ask. Specifically at Iowa, we do have embedded mental health counselors in some of our residence halls and locations and colleges throughout campus. So they are easily accessible. We are doing some telecounseling now with COVID restrictions. So there is that virtual component, but a lot of it's going to be walking distance or within like a few buildings from where you live.
Yeah, I mean, we just added a couple of counselors, mental health counselors or personal counselors is what we call them, to make sure that we're addressing students having the ability to go talk to somebody. And I think more and more that's like something that's, in my opinion, heartening to see, is that students are willing to say, like, I need to go talk to somebody. Like Annabelle and I, when we first started in college, it was very much like, you're homesick, it's okay, don't worry about it, you'll get over it. But now I think students of this generation understand that by talking to someone, maybe they'll feel a little bit better, or they'll have a resolution like, hey, go do X, Y, or Z. And that might help as you're navigating this big change that you've made in your life, right? So again, every kind of school, big, small, public, private, everybody's going to offer some sort of counseling, support, stuff that you can do, sessions you can attend to kind of help you through that transition. So, and more if it's needed, I guess.
Awesome. A couple more questions did roll in if you guys have time for a few more. Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks
Is there
for
a
sticking with
specific
us,
year?
everybody.
Is there a specific year or two of high school that colleges look at, or do they take into account all years equally?
We look at freshman, sophomore, and junior year equally. I think it's more concerning if there's like well, and this is like a weird year, but in a normal year, junior year, we say, okay, if there's a dip, like, why is there a dip? What's going on? I mean, COVID is impacting that for sure. So, but know that we don't have senior year. I think that's the other thing that gets lost in this conversation. We can see what classes you're taking, but we don't have your senior year grade. So it's literally just freshman, sophomore, and junior year.
Is showing growth, this is kind of a related question, is showing growth through grades something that will make past bad grades overlooked in admissions?
I don't think it's getting overlooked so much as looking at the context, right? We can see the struggle, we get it, it happens. That is probably part of a conversation of like, okay, but then look at sophomore year, look at junior year, you can see they're on this upward trajectory. That's much more reassuring to see than someone who had a really awesome freshman year and everything has gone downhill since then with no explanation, right? I think context is important in these conversations. I have heard, just to go back to this really quickly, that there are some schools that don't really look at freshman year as heavily as sophomore and junior year, but if that's something that you're wondering, you should definitely ask the school specifically. Annabelle, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Nope, nothing to add. That pretty much covered it. Yep.
Okay.
Is there anything else, ladies, that stands out to you when reading essays from applicants that makes you more inclined to admit them to your institution?
I would say this is probably more of a private school thing than a public school thing. To me, it's not necessarily like there's one secret answer to all of this. It's looking at the whole picture. Do we feel like you're going to be successful when you get to campus? Have you taken some, Annabelle talked about taking some challenging classes. Have you taken some challenging classes? Have you done pretty well in those classes? How are you spending your time outside of class? Are you a good fit to our campus? That's really what we're trying to discern when we look at your application, and all of these different pieces then help give us an answer to that question. When we talk about essays, I think the more that you can focus on yourself, the better. And that sounds weird because like we are kind of ingrained as people to not talk about ourselves because you don't want to feel like you're bragging, but like what ends up happening in some instances is that students will talk about a parent or a grandparent and they're like, oh my gosh, I love my grandparent, but we don't want, it's great to talk about them, but the focus should be like, what is your relationship? Why do you love them so much? What have you learned from them? Right? Like the focus should remain on you. And if you're staying authentic and true to yourself, you really can't go wrong. So
I just have a tip to add, and this is totally okay. We understand that you may reuse essays to send to other schools, but just make sure you proofread fully. I'm guilty of this sometimes in emails, but it's kind of like a jab when we we're like really excited about an application and we see like Iowa State, for example. No, and it's like, oh, actually you're applying to the University of Iowa. So just make sure you're reading through those things and adjusting accordingly.
Especially for the alumni on the staff, they might not take so kindly to that, right, Annabelle?
I think one last question, ladies, and I can maybe start, and you can elaborate. Do universities allow visits from sophomores? And is it uncommon for sophomores to start college visits? We advise students at ACHS, like you want to start as early as you're comfortable and feel like you have a vision for where you might want to go to start getting those experiences. That's pre-COVID advice. I think certainly the reality is right now, there are limitations from the college side of things as well about how many guests they can have on their campuses. And so still heavily encouraged from our perspective, but I'll let Megan and Annabelle add to that.
You nailed it. I think if a school's going to allow not senior visitors, right? So sophomores and juniors, in my opinion, it would probably be in the same group. Like our plan is to allow students who are not admitted seniors to start visiting over the summer. So that would be sophomores or juniors. I don't think there's anything wrong with sophomores visiting. We have sophomores visiting all the time. I would just confirm with schools before trying to sign up that you would be allowed to do so.
I would second that. And also start now. I mean, at least dive in, like Megan said, to the virtual visits. Yeah. So start now, and then as things open up and we're able to accommodate, the seniors have already done their visits, then yeah, absolutely. We would love for you to visit, but again, just check with the institution first.
I think that's covering all the questions we received. Megan, could you flash the contact info for you and Annabelle one more time, maybe?
Maybe.
Yeah, well, while we're working on that, certainly a huge thank you tonight to Megan and to Annabelle. We have such a wonderful opportunity to share your guys' expertise with our families. And so thank you, thank you, thank you. We are incredibly grateful for your time and your expertise. If you do want to get in touch with Megan and Annabelle, they are very gracious in offering that. And certainly we appreciate that as well.
Happy to help.
Yeah, well, thank you guys. I appreciate that, because you certainly have, your responsibilities to your own universities, but we really are thankful for how much you're willing to give that general perspective to our Antioch Community High School students as well. Please, families, give a shout to your school counselor and let us partner with you early on in this process. This is really a huge opportunity for us to serve you well, and our school counselors enjoy that and are ready to go for you. I want to say thank you again to Ms. Taylor Travers and the rest of our school counseling team. That website that was in our flyer, bit.ly/Antioch Spring College Planning, is a simple, small website, but it has some great other resources in addition to everything we've been able to share here tonight. And so please take advantage of that as well. Great opportunity there. And Megan, Annabelle, thank you again. We are so grateful and thankful for your partnership and your support for us and our students. And with that, I think pending any other notes, we'll say good night, everyone, and take care.
Have a good night,
everybody.
We'll see you soon.
Good night.